So today, I going further while dealing with specific states of mind, the mens rea aspect which I was dealing with, I intend dealing today with a very interesting state of mind which is described by the word fraudulently. Now, this word fraudulently, if you people see, the only definition of this word that you can find in the Indian Penal Code will exist in section 25 of the Indian Penal Code. Now, section 25, if you look into section 25 has a very interesting way of defining this section, this mental state of mind. If you read the definition of fraudulently, you will find that it is a kind of a circular definition which is leading you to nowhere. It says that fraudulently, anyone is said to act fraudulently who essentially does an act with an intention to defraud. Now, a definition of this kind, let us see section 25. Section 25 talks about this of the Indian Penal Code. Now, this kind of a definition actually does not really give the intent or the meaning of the section. It says a person is said to do a thing fraudulently if he does that thing with intent to defraud but not otherwise. Now, so therefore, this is a kind of a definition which, by the reasoning of logic, is considered to be a tautological definition. A definition which a positive is defined by its own negative. Here, the positive is being defined by its own negative in the sense that the positive is a fraudulent act, but it is being defined by its own negative by saying that it is something which is done with an intent to defraud. So, a positive being defined by an own negative gets us nowhere. How to apply this? So, this is the conundrum which one has seen over a period of time. So, this conundrum exists in literature also. This conundrum exists in poetry also. So, there are various examples which one can give of this conundrum. And amongst the examples, for instance, a few words which illustrate this metaphorically. The evening sunset is beautiful. If I say that, there is no need to bring in the word sunset or evening. You could do without one. The evening sunset is beautiful. So it is essentially done in literature and poetry generally to create emphasis. There is a very famous musician by the name of Bon Jovi. In one of his songs, he says, I want to live when I am alive. This is the lyric of that song. It says, I want to live when I am alive. So this definition is somewhat like that. To act fraudulently is to do something with an intent to defraud. So therefore, and not otherwise. So therefore, two expressions within this definition. One, an intent to defraud, and the other, being not otherwise, assumes importance. We will deal with both these aspects when we go further. Because this state of mind, fraudulently, is a very interesting state of mind in many ways. Because this state of mind is important in determining the commission of offences like forgery. Let us take a simple example of forgery, say. The section is defined under 463. Now, if you go to 463, you will find the use of both the expressions fraudulently or dishonestly used alternatively to make out the definition of forgery. The act has to be fraudulent or it has to be dishonest. Let us see 463 for a minute. Now 463, if we go into 463 as such, you will find 463 talks about this. Forgery. Whoever makes any false document or false electronic record or part of a document or electronic record with the intent to cause damage or injury to the public or to any person, or support any claim, or to cause any person to part with property or to enter into any express or implied contract, or with intent to commit fraud or that fraud be committed, commits forgery. So the word fraudulently is used in a different sense. It is the word fraud comes in out here. One, the word fraud comes in, and you will find that the other aspects of fraudulently and dishonestly also come in. Making it a little more clear would be the definition of making of a false document, which is 464. Now 464 says a person is said to make a false document or false electronic record first, whoever dishonestly or fraudulently. Now here comes the use of dishonestly or fraudulently in an alternative form. Now when you go back to forgery, forgery talks about the making of a false document. So the basis of a forgery is a making of a false document. And when we come to the definition of a false document, it specifically talks about the involvement of the making of the false document by either a fraudulent means or a dishonest means. So this is being used alternatively, meaning whereby that these two expressions have different meanings. They may have some color, they may draw some color from each other, but both the words have different meanings. The state of mind which is considered in both these words are completely different from each other. So now let us deal with what is the state of mind or this mens rea which is being talked of when we talk in terms of fraudulently. Now fraudulently, as opposed to dishonestly, because dishonestly is still defined to a great extent by the Act. When we go into the sections 23, 24 of the IPC, you will find that there is a definition where it talks about wrongful loss, wrongful gain by lawful or unlawful means. But whereas in relation to fraudulently, the word intent to defraud. So what does defraud consist of? Defraud, to understand defraud, you have to understand that it consists of one major element, a mental state, and that is deceit. Deceit is a major aspect, which is the one of the ingredients of a fraud. Now what is deceit then? So we go to the next aspect as to what is deceit. Now, to understand deceit, from the IPC I will also show you, but otherwise also to understand what is deceit. Deceit is a state of mind which is induced by certain behavior. How is it induced? What the accused does is he creates that belief in the person who is being deceived that what is being stated is actually true when it is not. So it is that state of belief which is being created in the mind of the deceived by this particular inducement which is being brought about by the deceiver to make him believe what is false to be true. And it is also a state of mind of the deceiver to the extent that the deceiver knows from his end that what he is trying to induce in the other is actually not true. So there are two states of minds which are in operation here. One that of the deceiver and the other of the deceived. The deceiver essentially being brought to this state of mind, bringing the state of mind in the deceived, that what is being stated is actually true when it is not. So this belief in itself which is being created in the mind of the deceiver is deceit. This could be by a concealment of facts. Now, This concealment of facts element, if you look into 415, the definition of cheating, please go to 415, definition of cheating will talk in the explanation that a dishonest concealment of facts will amount to also deceit. Now let us see 420 for 415 for a minute. If we go into 415 for a minute, 415 talks about this aspect as well. The explanation part, a dishonest concealment of facts is a deception within the meaning of this section. So it is that state of mind, the belief, but deceit in itself is not punishable. Why? Go back to the earlier lessons which I had taken. It is mens rea and mens rea alone. A state of mind which is being created in the deceived, and a state of mind which is being created by the act of the deceiver. That is deception. So deception per se alone is not punishable. So something more has to happen. Now what is that something more which is happening? That something more which is happening is that you are making the deceived to do something by which either the man who is deceiving is put to an advantage, or the person who is getting deceived is being put to an injury. So essentially, I come back to the definition that fraud would mean deceit coupled with injury caused. The equation out here is very simple. It is deceit coupled with injury caused, which will bring about the definition of what would be a fraud. So when I say fraudulently, it covers this definition. Now this is talking about definitions. Now let us see how it has come to be applied. Because I remember my younger son, his teacher, while teaching music to him, used to say that if you learn one raga well, you will learn multiple ragas on that basis. So if we understand the facts of this as applied in a particular case well, we will understand the concept better. Let us now try and see with illustrations as to how this element of fraud or fraudulently has been dealt with. One of the interesting cases in relation to this, and one of the landmark cases which most of you might have also had the occasion to see, is a case by the name of Vimla versus Delhi Administration. Now, Dr. Vimla versus Delhi Administration, 1963, Supreme Court. This is a very interesting kind of a scenario, and the facts of this case were, I will give you the citation a little later. The facts were that Dr. Vimla was in love with her child, as we all are. Now, for instance, like Varun buying a new car, but not buying the car in his name. He is very fond of his child, so he buys the car in his child's name. The child is a minor. Similarly, Dr. Vimla decided to buy the car in the name of her child. Now, the car had been bought, the car was running well, till such time that the car met with an accident. On two occasions, one a minor accident and a major accident. The minor accident and the major accident forced Dr. Vimla to claim compensation in relation to the accident incurred from the insurance company. Now the car had been insured. So she fills up the form and she also receives the claim. The catch is that she filled up the form in the name of the owner of the car because the RC was in the name of the minor. It was not the minor who was driving, it was she who was driving. The car had been bought by her in the name of the minor. She fills up the form and she gets the monies from the insurance company, and she also gives the receipt, and in the receipt she signs as the minor, like Varun signing as in his son's name, and he gets the money or she gets the money. Now, a case under 467, 471 and the relevant provisions were made out. The question which came up was that did she do a fraudulent act? While answering this question, interestingly, the Supreme Court said that here the element of fraud cannot be discerned because of 2-3 reasons. One, that the car was insured. Two, the claim which was made by her was not false. There was no false claim because the accident had happened. And three, there was no injury caused. There was no injury caused to the insurance company because the insurance company is bound to insure the car on the payment of a premium. And there was an accident, so they were also legally liable to pay. So to that extent, there was no injury caused. So there might have been deception. See, deception was not ruled out. Try and understand. That is why initially when I spoke about the definition, I spoke about deception as well as injury. So till such time that deception and injury do not gather together, there is no meeting there, the element of fraud will not be established. So here was a scenario where probably there was deception, but injury was not there. In another illustrative case, which also you people must have read at some point of time, I have discussed this during the course of our interactions in the office, and this is a judgment by the name of Dr. S. Dutt. Dr. S. Dutt's case again is a case study in point. And see the way in which the Supreme Court deals with the issue. Because what happened in Dr. S. Dutt was that Dr. S. Dutt was summoned as a defense witness. In the course of a trial, you know that once the prosecution case ends and the statement of the accused is through, the defense is called upon to lead its evidence. So in order to rebut the case of the prosecution, which was based on an expert evidence, the defense also decided to summon their own expert. If you people remember, Varun could be remembering this because Varun has been with me for some time. Varun must be remembering Mr. Balasubramaniam, Mama.
Yes, sir.
Now, as far as Balasubramaniam was concerned, in one of our cases, we produced Balasubramaniam as a defense witness because he was an expert in explosives. Since he had served in some capacity as an explosives expert in the Indian School of Mines, we decided to examine him in a matter. Similarly, in S. Dutt, though in our case, Mama's situation was different, S. Dutt's situation is different. So, where in S. Dutt's matter he was called and summoned as a witness for a defense, for the defense, the prosecution decided to challenge his credentials. In a cross-examination, you are entitled to challenge the credentials of the witness who is coming as an expert. Meaning whereby you can ask him questions about his qualification. Meaning whereby you can ask or challenge his qualifications to the extent of his experience as well, on the basis of what he has qualified. So I am not commenting on that. Anyway, so the question was that when that challenge came in relation to his credentials, he claimed that he was an expert on the basis of a degree which he has obtained from a college from London, Imperial Science and Technology Centre in London. So it was a very high sounding kind of a college, which probably impelled the prosecution to challenge it, and they asked him to produce his certificates. They made a prayer, and the judge directed S. Dutt to produce the certificates in court. So when those certificates were produced and the diploma which he claimed was looked into, it was found that the diploma actually was not a valid document. So when this happened, S. Dutt, who came to depose as a defense witness, had a case of forgery and user of a forged document as a genuine one registered against him. Now when he faced those charges, the Supreme Court, while considering the issue, came to the conclusion that here again is a case where it doesn't fit in within the bracket of being a fraudulent act. Because what the Supreme Court also decided in this case was that again, one, there has to be a voluntary act on the part of the person to deceive somebody and to injure somebody in that process. Now in this case, the Supreme Court said that as far as S. Dutt was concerned, the getting in of the certificate, the bringing of the certificate was not voluntary. It was something which the court had ordered. So on the basis of the order of the court, he had produced the document. He did not have an intention to injure anybody in relation to the production of the said document. So therefore, injury and deceit are not combining together, though the court held that the intention to deceive the court or to deceive the opposite side in believing, making them believe that he was an expert when he was not, did exist, but the element of injury was not there. So till such time that the element of injury doesn't combine, or the element of putting oneself to an advantage does not exist, because the injury need not be an injury of a pecuniary nature. Now this is also one of the differences when we deal with the aspect of dishonesty. We will see that one of the aspects is this, that as far as an fraudulent act is concerned, there is no pecuniary aspect attached to it. The injury which is contemplated out here may be in relation to the infringement of a legal right, the taking away of a legal right. It could be a non-tangible injury which is being caused. For instance, a harm in reputation to somebody. So here the question is that there should be that intent to cause that injury along with the intention to deceive. Both these things need to combine. And when they combine together, the act becomes fraudulent. So therefore the definition says intent to defraud. So that defraud is explained in this form. That tautological aspect which I was talking about earlier gets explained in this fashion. Now interestingly, because when we talk in terms of a document, now 464 was something which I dwelt with. A document, in fact, also finds definitions in the Indian Penal Code. Apart from it being defined in the Evidence Act, you will find a definition of a document in section 29 of the Indian Penal Code. Now, section 29 is an interesting definition. I would like you people to go through section 29 with me for a minute. Because next of what I am going to deal with is in relation to this aspect. Document, a false document, and how the preparation of a false document goes on to give the offense of a forgery, and other offenses in relation to that. They are all interconnected in a way. So when we talk about section 29, let us come to 29 and see the definition of a document out here. 29 says, the word document denotes any matter expressed or described upon any substance by means of letters, figures or marks, or by more than one of these means intended to be used, or which may be used as evidence of that matter. Now, the important words are that one, what is the matter? And two, the specific word which is used as evidence of that matter. Now the question is, why I am coming to this section? The question that arises is this, that this marks, these expressions, these figures or drawings or whatever form they are in, on the matter which they are subscribed. When the words say evidence out here, the evidence that is being referred to out here is of the existence of the document. Words, expressions, marks, letters, figures, all those are evidence of the existence of a document. It does not relate to the truth or veracity of the said material. It is only indicative of the presence of a document. In the sense, I will illustrate this with the example of a case, which will make things a little more easier to understand. Now, this case, interestingly, related to a case of 1947, and the venue was interestingly a place where our friend Weber resides, Meerut. Now, in Meerut, the name of this case was Dwarkanath versus King Emperor. Now, interestingly, Meerut at that point of time, because of the war which was going on in 1944, around that period, certain regulations had been brought about in Meerut. A legislation had been brought out, and also certain regulations in that legislation had been brought out, that as far as renting out of properties were concerned, the properties in that area would be rented out through the medium of a house controller, because there was paucity of accommodation in relation to government servants, there was paucity of accommodation in relation to security personnel, and paucity of accommodation in relation to the military personnel. So therefore, anybody who wished to rent a property, the renting of the property would take place through the rent controller or the house controller, whom they termed as the house controller at that point of time. Now what had happened was that this Dwarkanath had a property in Meerut. And that property which he had in Meerut, he decided that he wants to rent out the same. So he approached the house controller with an application. And the house controller, interestingly, thereafter rented out that property to a head constable in a traffic constable in the police setup. Now, the laws also provided that there would be or there could be a ground of eviction in case the properties were sublet by the tenant to somebody else without the permission of the house controller. Now, as things would have it, the head constable, because of the fact that he was in the constabulary and that the police has its own ways, he decided to make some more money and rented the property to two other persons. Now, when he rented the property to two other persons, this came to the knowledge of the landlord. So, the landlord moved an application seeking his ouster from the said property on this basis that there was subletting on his behalf. On the application moved by the landlord, the house controller issued a show cause to the tenant, and the tenant decided to file a written statement. Now, from here is where the element of a document which I am talking of comes into play. So, what he did, he filed a reply, and this reply which he filed, at that point of time, this was filed on, say, for example, at the end of January, on 31st of January, say. Sometime in February, the landlord also came to know of certain other facts, so he decided to move a supplementary application bringing in those facts that not only had he sublet it to X, he also sublet the portions to another person called Y. So therefore my grounds, and apart from bona fide necessity, I have got a big family, I require my premises, so this fellow needs to be evicted. Now when this happened, it suddenly struck our man the constable that my reply which I had filed earlier may not adequately answer the scenario which is being now projected by the landlord, wherein the landlord had also claimed that he was claiming monies from those subtenants whom he had rented it out to further. So he decided to substitute the first reply with a new reply, wherein he took a stance that there was no subtenancy as such, and these persons had been allowed to stay at the behest of the landlord, and he was only collecting monies on behalf of the landlord. And what he did, he removed the first reply and he substituted this. Now, as you all know, a written statement when it is filed, or any reply which is filed, or any application which is filed, a copy of the same is given to the other side. So the first application which he had filed, that copy he had given to the landlord. Now the question that came up before the court was this, because he claimed that this was not the copy which I had given. The copy which now exists in the court record is the actual reply which I had filed. So now the court had to determine, one, whether the copy was the actual reply which was filed on the first instance, and two, whether this reply which is now being claimed by the tenant was introduced subsequently, and therefore whether, one, it was a document in the eyes of the Indian Penal Code in relation to both, and whether the offences of forgery had been committed in the said process or not. So this was the interesting proposition which was thrown up, and the court, at the time when this issue came up before the court, one of the arguments which was tried to be propounded by the defense was that as far as the reply was concerned, the reply filed by the tenant was concerned, if you are going to take that as the incriminating piece of evidence, in relation to that, the plea that was taken was that this would not be a document in the eyes of law. This was the plea that was taken, because according to the defense counsel, the defense counsel's plea was that the veracity of the said document, the truth of the said document, the content which actually spoke about the truth of the document, that could not be determined. It cannot be that you can take this as the evidence of what was the stance, or you can take what was the copy as the evidence of the stance. So therefore this is not a document. So the court said that no, when we look into the definition of a document as far as the IPC is concerned, what we need to see is that whether the presence of those marks in the copy, what is ascribed in the copy as the marks, what is written in that, that is only a pointer, something which can be seen by the naked eye, is only a pointer to the existence of that document. It does not relate to the veracity of the document. So the question is that whether that document existed or not, that evidence, and then further the question to determine as to whether the substitution of the same, amounted to an offence under 463. Now the substitution part, of course, on the basis of the definitions which are available in 464, the very first aspect of 464, on the basis of that they came to the conclusion that the offence of forgery is made out. Because when we go into 464, there are three basic ways on which a document can be termed to be a false document. There are three aspects to it, three major aspects to it when we look into the definition. And those three major aspects need to be satisfied. One, the first one is that the document which is executed or made should be one which is being made by the person claiming it to be of someone else, or with the authority of someone else when he knows that it does not purport to be made by that person or by the authority of that person. That is the first. The second aspect is that in order to bring it within the ambit of a false document, he or she who creates the false document should have altered the original document in some form. There should be some kind of an alteration to it. And the third aspect being that he obtains a document by deception. One, he obtains a document from somebody by practicing deception on him. Or, in the alternative, he gets the same document prepared from a person whose mental faculties do not exist for the execution of the said document. So it is only in these three parameters are satisfied, any one of these three parameters are satisfied, that a document could be said to be a false document. Now the illustrative case in relation to this would be the case of Muhammad Ibrahim versus State of Bihar, which you people have read. Now, Muhammad Ibrahim also threw a very interesting facet. I am just giving you a brief conspectus of the facts, because these are all scenarios, states of minds, which depend on a fact scenario which develops in relation to a particular situation. That is why it is easier to understand the same through the examples which are provided within the section, the illustrations, or through the case materials which we are trying to arrive at as to which are those cases where a fraudulent act is made out, or those cases where a false document is being created, or those cases which satisfy these offences. Now, as far as Muhammad Ibrahim's case was concerned, I am reminded of a very old operator, and that old operator was a man called Natwar Lal. You people have heard of Natwar Lal? Now, Natwar Lal is considered to be one of the most accomplished cheats which this country has ever produced. He had a very long life. He hailed from a small town in Bihar called Siwan. There is a small connect to that, my wife hails from there. So, anyway, now as far as Natwar Lal was concerned, it is credited to Natwar Lal that he managed to sell monuments like the Taj Mahal and the Red Fort, and including the parliament along with the MPs there, to unsuspecting people by creating a belief that he was authorized to sell the same, and he made money out of it. So I yet to come across a situation like this. So now, and interestingly, these are situations which I am talking of from real life. Natwar Lal, in fact, had a very long innings. He died at the age of 90 or so. And during that entire period, his productive period, there are some 125 odd cases which have been registered against him. And the Indian jails could not contain him for long. So, speaking about Natwar Lal, similarly you have situations like that all over the world, where in fact even in America, for instance, there was a film which was made on the life of a master forger. There was a master forger by the name of Abagnale. Now this man used to specialize in forging checks. He used to specialize in forging checks. He used to specialize in disguises. He also had a long run, and in fact, towards the fag end of his life, and even today, he continues to be advising the Federal Bureau of Investigation in relation to check frauds. Now he has been engaged, gainfully employed, from what he learned in his profession as a forger, to track down forgers further. And a famous award-winning film, Catch Me If You Can, This is an award-winning film which was made on his life. So now coming back to Muhammad Ibrahim. So what happened in Muhammad Ibrahim? Muhammad Ibrahim essentially was under the belief that he owned a property within that entire village area. It was a crowded village area. Within that, he was under the belief that he owned a property, and that said property was occupied by somebody who had wrongfully occupied it. And therefore, he was within his rights. He was growing old. He decided that now I have to dispose of the same. So he sold off the property to some person. Now it so happened that the property that he sold actually did not belong to him, but belonged to someone else, the occupier. Now the case was brought against Muhammad Ibrahim by the actual owner of the property. Now look at the interesting scenario. It is not the person to whom he had sold. The purchaser had not brought a case against him, but the original owner of the said property brought a case against him. Now when that happened and the cases were registered, the Supreme Court went into the entire issue and analyzed as to whether any forgery took place in that process, considered 464, and in relation to 464, the three aspects which I just spoke of, that the three ingredients or the three major aspects which are there in relation to forgery, in relation to the making of a false document, were not satisfied here. Because he did not represent himself while making the sale deed to be the owner. He represented himself to be the owner. If he had said, if I say that I am Hariharan and I am the owner of Taj Mahal and I sell Taj Mahal, Shah Jahan will not have any case against me. This is what the case says. The person to whom I have sold Taj Mahal, I have sold Taj Mahal to say Shadab. Shadab may have a case against me. But Shah Jahan cannot have a case against me, is what Muhammad Ibrahim says. Because it doesn't fall within those three aspects. I never represented myself to be Shadab or myself to be Varun. I represented myself to be myself. And I said, I am the owner of this property, I am selling it. So therefore, since it did not fit in within these three elements of 464, there was no element of making a false document. If there was no false document made, automatically, because false document, making of a false document is covered within the ambit of the definition of forgery, so therefore there is no forgery. And therefore the other attenuating offences will also not be made out. So this was what Muhammad Ibrahim said. So I think today we are coming to an end of our timing. And with this I will put an end to the aspect of this particular aspect of the mind, and that is being fraudulent. And we will deal with the dishonest part subsequently, and a few other states of mind before we progress a little further. Thank you very much. See you guys.